It's episode 9 of our City Skylines build. Welcome back to Providence. We are downtown, and I have decided that this tall building that we built is going to be home to the Gulf Coast Bank headquarters. And that would kind of make sense. A nice tall building that will be home to a major banking institution that makes its home in the Deep South. I want to start off by building our first town hall, and that town hall is going to go into this empty space. Kind of just looks super cool. And it's also the first asset to be created by a individual person. So when the new asset editor came out, I believe that was the first thing that ever came out for the game. So it's kind of a special part of City Skylines history, I guess. First user-made asset to be released for the game. Not by the devs, but by a person. And it's a beautiful asset. I think it's, I guess it's facing the wrong direction. Maybe. Nope, it's right. The front and the back look pretty similar, except there's a door on the front, so that makes sense. And we have the insignia of the Prussian coat of arms, I believe that is. It's a real town hall from a real city somewhere in the world. But I think it looks pretty good there. Kind of anchors that part of town, gives it a nice historic sort of a feel. That's one thing I want to make sure. When you're looking down a street, you want to see something that's kind of iconic at the end of every street. That way, it just kind of ties everything together. So, last time we worked on building our tram, let's take a look at happiness and see what is the concern. Crime risk. That's our biggest issue. So, if we build community centers, welfare offices will help reduce the risk of crime. Right now, we have no shortage of jail availability or prison availability. And it seems like, I guess we need more police stations. So we'll go ahead and do that. We're going to start by rebuilding the police station, which had been in our city, but it burned down in the Great Fire event. So it will be put back here. Nice historic looking police station. We've unlocked some more new buildings. Oh, that's a nice office tower. Might have to place that. I think that historic old police station looks nice, just juxtaposed against the more modern office tower next door to it. I think in today's episode, our goal is to fill in the downtown a little bit more and see if we can make it look a little bit more like a downtown area. Because right now, it's pretty sparse. We probably ought to build a welfare office. Don't know where, though. Maybe we'll get around to that later. Let's go back to our signature buildings. I know we deleted a lot of signature buildings because they got burned down, so might not be a bad idea to go back through and see if we can find some good ones to place, because each one will give you some kind of special benefit. So it's good to place all of your signature buildings as they become available. I believe that's the original place where the bookstore had been placed before it burned down. We'll put it back. We could build a corner theater. That's kind of cool. Northeastern Inn. It used to be over here by where the hospital is. I think we'll put it back because I kind of liked it being there. We have a lot of demand for residential zones, so I think we're going to have to oblige it. Just because we got to meet the demand we have. And then we have commercial demand, so we'll do some mixed use here. Mixed use, residential and commercial. There's a nice little historic mansion. Fits in well as a part of the old town. Kind of a gentrified sort of an area there. You have some nice little shops mixed with residential area. Here we have some room to build something. Certainly do wish the game was not inclined to make zoning so awkward. But that's all right. We definitely want this area adjacent to the traffic circle to be as well thought out as possible, because that would be probably the main tourist attraction of the city. Like that, like if people are coming to town, that's going to be where they go. Like they're going to go there first, probably before they go anywhere else. So you want to make sure that it's an interesting place to be. There we go. That actually looks pretty good. I like that. We turn this little eatery a little bit, it'll kind of probably look better if it's facing the road there. Get it as close to the street as possible. There we go. We probably could fit another signature building in this space. Riverside Grill, it's too big. Espresso to go. I wonder if we could put the espresso shop right there. I think we could. Because we have all these paths, but those paths could be moved. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll rework those paths in just a moment. But I think a nice modern espresso shop might be just what we want for this space. Only problem is that's more like a like a drive-through kind of a place. That's like suburban. That's not the kind of thing we'd have in the downtown core. So I digress. We're actually gonna put the espresso to go out over here, where our fast food restaurant area is, because that's more of that kind of a establishment. So we're gonna have to find something else. There's a 2-story, 3-story building that's got a steakhouse in it. That might fit in really well right on the corner. So it's got a blank wall, so I think we want to kind of change that up a little bit. Thing where that actually will fit in well is right here on the corner, and we're just gonna demolish those little houses just because that looks really good there. Here we have the Canopy Cafe, and that has some parking in the back. That's all right. The only issue I see is this bus station's kind of in the way, so I think what we'll do is we'll move the bus station just a little bit so it's not blocking that driveway. We'll put a park bench there. Maybe. I don't know if there's room for a residential high-rise there. Something. Probably a couple row houses to fill in that space. I don't know what these residences that we just zoned around the inside of that traffic circle are going to look like. I may not like them. Might wind up demolishing them. We'll see. We'll see how they look. I don't think I like that one. We need, if we're going to have zoning over here, we're going to need a path so that pedestrians can get down there. I guess that works. Wonder if we can do another path here. Kinda. There we go. I think we're gonna demolish that building too, because it doesn't really fit in very well. That looks a lot more natural. there we have some bicycle stands. So bikes can park there, and that might also help a little bit with the tram ridership. I don't know about the folks kind of cutting all the way across there on bikes in the roundabout, but I guess it's all right. We'll go ahead and put a bike lane on both sides of the street, just because that might make it a little more bike friendly. Look at those bikes. They don't care. They're just they'll cut across. They'll go wherever they want. Maybe we do need some crosswalks there, just because if we don't put a crosswalk here, it's just not really going to be particularly safe. So on second thought, I don't know. Like, if I build a crosswalk there, then what's the point of all this pedestrian overpasses that I've made? So maybe I don't want the... Maybe I don't want the crosswalks there after all. There we go. not sure I like all of those many pedestrian paths, but they do they serve their purpose. It's at least more, it's more filled in. It's interesting. It's kind of quirky. So we might come back and kind of rework some of that later on. But for now, it's fine. But you can't have a downtown area that doesn't look like it's filled with buildings. That's the thing. So what do we got here? Another empty space. Kind of feel like we should do maybe a parking garage, because they're not the most fun thing to put in a city, but every city has parking garages, so. That's an interesting parking garage there. More of an old-fashioned garage. Fits in well, though. I like it. These houses are going to have to go, because not all of them, but a lot of them just don't fit in. Like, you're not going to have single family homes right across the street from a tall skyscraper kind of a building. Just wouldn't really be a thing. So we have demand for high density residential zoning, so we'll go ahead and increase our density here. We can leave a few of these houses just because sometimes you'd have like some townhouses or something. You could have them just because the city builds up and a few of them become like historic places or something. It does still kind of feels like we don't have quite the right mix of parks in the game. Which is, I'm sure, pretty easy to fix, because we're going to have a lot of user-made assets entering the mix, so. Not to worry. It's better. A little bit more density. We have a dog park and a nice little pub and lounge. A historic hotel. Not a big hotel, but a historic one. Those kind of large historic houses, they can stay. But this house with like a long driveway and a front yard, it doesn't really fit in there. That's a pub as well. Doesn't fit in. I don't want the big parking lot. What is that? Now that might be a good fit. That, all right, I like that. What is it? It's a award-winning gourmet restaurant. It fits in quite well there. Few palm trees. You might actually be able to fit a pedestrian path in there. That actually worked out great. All those little pedestrian paths, they add interesting diversity to the neighborhood. They also will help with getting pedestrians off the surface streets, and they'll be good for reducing congestion if folks use them instead of crossing maybe at a crosswalk or something. That block looks a lot better than it did. Now our main signature skyscraper doesn't look quite as out of place as it used to. There's the Mermaid's Tea Lounge. That's nice. Definitely starting to look a little bit more like a real downtown area now that we're getting those spaces filled in. Going back to the idea of a welfare office, I think we can fit that in here. There we go. That's the Japanese style welfare office. It actually looks really good. I like the Japanese welfare office better than the base game version, just because it looks more like something you would see in a real city. And it looks kind of, you know, like it could be a church or whatever, right? Like that's one thing we don't have enough of, I think, in this game. We need more things like churches and stuff. Because many times in real life, the spaces that would be serving the community are going to be, you know, maybe a church or something like that. And I know a lot of people will be like, oh, well, you know, we don't like religion in our games or whatever, but I think that's ridiculous, because the reality is that it's supposed to be a realistic game, and so in real life you have all sorts of churches and things like that out there. They're part of life, so if you don't like that, well, you kind of don't like the way the world is, which is fine. But I like my cities to be realistic. So I want to make sure I can put a fair share of churches and other things in the game. Saying you don't want to have churches or religious buildings in the game is like if I said, well, I don't drink, so I don't think there should be any bars in the game. Like, okay, well, it's fine, I guess, but it's not very realistic if you have a city without any nightlife in it, right? Here we've got a space. Well, I wonder if we can do a expansion to the cemetery here. House of Remembrance. That's actually kind of cool. Oh, I like that. Look at how it's all lit up. It's pretty. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the World Trade Center Memorial, actually. Kind of a funny thing to be reminded of when you look at extension for the cemetery, but that is kind of what it reminds me of. Then we have these little paths. Unfortunately, that's really, really steep, so I don't know. Whoops. Did not mean to do that. I guess we can allow that to be like that. I just don't like those steep, I don't like those steep paths, really. For now, though, we'll leave it alone. It's fine. What we got going on here? We have a lot of wasted space. Well, there's a nice small skyscraper. We can place that. So I don't want to place any buildings that are absolutely ridiculously enormous. You know, like they can be big, but not so big that they tower over the skyline and make it look ridiculous. Like, we'll get there eventually, but I want to start. You know, I think this cemetery, it's bugging me. I don't like the placement of it. I think we're going to move it. We're going to move it somewhere else because I don't like it that it's on a hill and it doesn't really fit in very well. So let's go. We'll move the cemetery over to the south side of town. What if we put it right there? Yeah, I think that adds a little bit of character to that part of town. And it frees up space here, which we could use for placing signature office tower. And that really looks super cool. I do like the way that looks. And that will improve our pedestrian infrastructure. We can also do a two-way bicycle path here. I guess I should reverse those. There we go. Maybe not. Still backwards. People are definitely using that. Though I don't like the steepness there. I think I need to work on that a little more. All right. That's better. Definitely nice seeing the bikes, I will have to say. Like all the bikes traveling around. Super cool after 2 years of not having them in the game. It's pretty cool to see them finally there. And we can do a large bicycle parking hall. So people can actually, you know, I was going to say right there, I guess it's blocked. So there we go. Spending a ridiculous amount of time messing around with this. But the thing is, if you don't get it right the first time, you know, are you really going to ever come back and fix it later? Maybe not. So there we have a whole lot of bicycle parking here. I think we'll call this building Regions Bank Center, because Regions Bank is actually in real life based out of Birmingham, Alabama, but I could see them having an office there too. So starting to look better, more like a city. We have all of these high rises here, which are kind of iconic in a way. But we're going to need to fill in this space. So I think I want to go with that zoning style because I like the way those look. Mediterranean heritage, medium density housing. So we're going to do that. Got to find it. So many different zoning styles. Because we gotta connect this part of town to the main part of downtown, so it feels like that whole strip is a continuous defining part of the downtown corridor. Here's the lobster tail. A nice little kind of country looking restaurant. Which kind of reminds me, I kind of miss going to Cracker Barrel. It's kind of crazy, all that weird controversy about Cracker Barrel. Everybody freaking out because supposedly it was going woke because they changed their logo. And I get it. I get it. But, you know, the thing is, there's so much of this activist culture, like on both sides, on every side of the aisle these days. Like, everyone wants to be like, oh, well, you know, how dare somebody do something? Like, you know, and if you think about it, like, who cares? Like, come on. Like, you're going to complain about a restaurant changing a logo because that's supposedly, like, you know, woke or something. I mean, if you want to talk about something, talk about the fact that average American can't even afford to go to a restaurant anymore. And talk about that, you know? Just one of those things. Like, you think about it and it just seems kind of ridiculous how people get all fired up about things. And the reality is, as long as people are fighting about silly things that don't really make any difference, then they aren't gonna really focus on the bigger issues, right? Like, that's the high level of it. You know, video game gets released and somebody's gonna be mad because of some aspect of the game design that didn't align with what they wanted to see. You know, like something like that. Like, those are the kinds of things we see people getting all upset about things, and the reality is we don't have any reason to be spending our time thinking about stuff that adds trivial frustration to our lives. We don't even really have business complaining about serious stuff, because you have to ask yourself the question, like, what is my complaining or my activism gonna do about it, right? Like, is it gonna make the world a better place? Maybe, if you're doing something about it. But if you're just complaining because you're jumping on the bandwagon, I don't know that it's really doing anything other than disturbing your own peace. I spend a lot less time than I used to looking at the news. I just kind of try to focus on things that are more inspiring, you know? And which oftentimes winds up being pretty much nothing, because not saying the world doesn't have its share of interesting things, but a lot of the stuff out there is just noise. So the more you kind of shift away from that, the better off you are in some cases. Amazing how these footpaths can really work wonders. The other problem I have with zoning is like there's so many different, like each zone has different depths of zoning blocks. So if you're trying to maximize your space, you kind of have to know like what zones have large buildings, what zone types have small buildings, and then plan accordingly. I like that building. What is that? That's EU high density housing right there. Seem to have a little bit of a problem with dead people going on here. And all those folks waiting for a hearse pickup. That's an interesting layout for modular death care center, crematorium. Well, now we have plenty of capacity. Fits in well. It's kind of a interesting area of town we have here. You know, we got our prison and we got our crematorium, got our fire fighting helicopter area, garbage dump. That's our municipal services area. If you use your imagination thusly, you might conclude it's a little bit dystopian. I was watching a thing about New Orleans after Katrina, and they had the prisoners all stuck in there, and then they had no power, and the city was like unraveling, and then they just basically treated these people like, I mean, in this horrific sort of a way, like there's no words for how horrific the conditions in some of those places were. And definitely makes you think, you know, about how when things go really fall apart, you know, people can go back to their savage ways, and it's every man for himself, you know. It's why we have to try to protect the institutions of civilization, keep things flowing along, because most of us haven't ever really seen hard times, like really bad times. So we got to try to make sure we don't ever get to that point as a society. Now, how are we doing on? Yeah, I mean, we seem to have a lot of people waiting for a hearse. Guess some old people have perished. Something of that nature. Maybe we can put another mortuary somewhere over here. I was looking for an empty space that's not occupied by anything that I could squeeze an extra building into. Maybe we'll put it right there. That's all right. We don't have any demand for office buildings yet. So I wonder, too many unoccupied buildings? Maybe it's partly because of this. I put this signature building here. Looks like it is occupied. We could upgrade that building. City Hall. So this functions as a city hall, and it includes disaster response. Well, that's cool. I think in order to build up our office demand, we just have to keep on expanding our residential coverage, because we have more residential demand than anything else. I'm not super sure, but I think the way the game works is if you have good education coverage, eventually you have less demand for industry and more demand for office. So let's go ahead and build another elementary school. Kind of a cool city elementary school. That's good education coverage. I think now I'm just going to kind of hang around and wait for more people to move in, and hopefully we can start generating some demand for office space, because I do want more offices. Now that the city's kind of filled in, like the urban core at least is kind of filled in. It feels reasonably mature. We're going to probably start expanding outward, contribute more to the urban sprawl, the countryside, the farms, just because that's the key to realism, I think. Having a city where it goes out for quite a ways. Like, probably we'll work on filling up this entire peninsula with something. Not with high density, but with some kind of development. But for the time being, that leaves us in a pretty good place. And I think the city looks a lot better now than it did when we started the session. And it's starting to definitely feel kind of distinctive, you know? Like it's pretty elegant to look at. Initially it looked janky, but now it's kind of finding itself. So I don't know what we're gonna do in the next one, but probably just expand outward and leave the inner city alone for a while, and then we'll come back to it later on, because I don't want to go too crazy with tall buildings and stuff, just because we want to tell a story, and real cities don't just exist as a small island of skyscrapers with nothing else around them. In any case, till next time, thanks so much for watching.